So, yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Mohammed Eki, and today we're going to be talking about data privacy for increased customer data protection, basically. So, and this topic is a very interesting topic and could be as well complex. So, but for the sake of this personal knowledge development session, I had to break it down into a very concise presentation so as not to go into so much deep concepts as regarding data protection. So for this particular presentation, we're going to be walking ourselves through some few concepts. One of which is we'll be talking about what data privacy is. We'll also be highlighting the different types of data privacy. We'll also get to know why we need to protect our data at every point in time. A major misconception, which is data privacy and data security, would also be knowing the difference between these two. And most importantly, the techniques involved in protecting data. So to start with, what is data privacy? So data privacy, which is also called information privacy, generally means the proper storage, access, retention, immutability, and security of sensitive data. Just like we all know, data is information. And at some point, some information might be regarded private. For us to be able to properly secure and privatize this particular data, we need to apply some concept of data privacy to our data. So it literally just means, for you to be able to properly store, access, and retain sensitive data, basically. It can also mean the ability of a person to determine for themselves who, when, and what extent personal data about them is shared or is communicated to others. As individuals, sometimes when we interact with the World Wide Web, we oftentimes don't tend to share much information about ourselves. At that point where we are trying to interact with the www, we have the ability to determine, how we'd want to share our personal information, when to share our personal information, and when not to share it.
I guess there is a network glitch from his end. Let's just wait a bit.
So for this personal information I did talk about, this personal information basically could be names, health records, there could be social security numbers, there could be credit card numbers. There could also be financial data, or sometimes real world behaviors. So these are the kind of personal information that could be attributed to every single individual. Just like I mentioned as well, it gives us the ability for us to know at what point, when, how, and to what extent but our personal information could be shared or communicated to others. So that's basically what data privacy is. So we still have some of the types of data privacy. We have the non-sensitive PII. We also have the non-personal identifiable information PII. So the particular kind of personal information we did talk about, health records, names, and all of those. Some of them could be sensitive, some of them could also be non-sensitive. So the non-sensitive PII, these are actually informations that are already in the public record, such as phone book or online directory. So just like we have it with some of the telecoms, they do have informations about, our phone numbers and all of those. These are things that are quite public in a way. So we also have the non-PII. So these are data that cannot be used to identify a person, right? There are some sort of data or some category of data that we cannot use to identify somebody. And this includes device ID, sometimes your browser cookies and all of those. However, some privacy law, holds that cookies at times can be considered as personal data because for some attackers, they can make use of your cookies, because your cookies actually has some level of traces that, can be used in combination with other identifiers to establish a personal identity. So privacy laws these days now says that cookies can also be considered as someone's personal data, right? So these are the two types of data that we have, the non-sensitive PII, and we have also the non-PII, basically. So moving forward, we'd also be talking about why we need to protect data, right? So in modern world, digital transformation is altering every aspect of how today's business operate and compete. We've seen digital transformation in all industries. We've seen it in the automobile industry. We've seen it in virtually all industries. And enterprises are actually producing, they are storing, and they are manipulating an ever-increasingly amount of data. So data can come from different aspects, right? Enterprises and companies, might be producing data of people that engage with their products, for example, people that make use of their services, for example, and all of those. Those are productions of data. And these data are actually stored by these enterprises or companies, and they increase over time because of the more people tend to engage with their solutions and their products, they tend to increase more amount of data. So with this increase of data, right, it's prompts us to actually, have an increase in data governance. So the more we produce more data, the more we need to govern this particular data, right? And most importantly, keeping private data and sensitive information safe, is very paramount, right? For example, like a financial data or healthcare information and other personal user data, if gone into the wrong hands, right, it can actually create a very dangerous situation, right? We also have the lack of access control regarding personal information. This can also put individuals at risk for fraud and identity theft. So sometimes when your personal information goes into the wrong hands, you tend to fall into some sort of fraudulent activity, for example. So sometimes people might mistakenly, lose their ATM information, as you tend to see unauthorized access to funds sometimes and all of those. So these are personal information about you that got, into the public domain and, actually rendered you into that risk, basically. For example, as well, a data breach at the government level might cause or might risk the security of the entire country, right? If it also occurs in an organization or in a company, it can make your proprietary data accessible to your competitor. So these are reasons why we need to protect our data, because of all of these data breaches, lack of access control regarding your personal information, which could risk you to fraud and theft and all of those. So that's the major reasons why we need to protect our data at all time, right? So coming to the major misconceptions that we do have in the industry today is sometimes people use the word data privacy and data security interchangeably, but they're actually not the same, because data privacy is actually a branch of data security, more like a subset of data security that is majorly concerned with the handling of data, right? It actually helps for it all revolves around matters such as data collection, regulatory compliance, and all of those. So in essence, or in a nutshell, what data privacy focuses on is how an entity protects data while sharing to third parties, right? And it also focuses on regulations. So we have different kind of regulations, different governmental regulations when it comes to handling data. So for us in Nigeria, we have the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation Act in 2019. So that regulation actually states all of the things that we need to abide by while we are making use of data in Nigeria, basically. So data security, on the other hand, actually concentrates on keeping data safe from attackers, or from hackers or the likes, right? It refers to the process and action that protects your data from unauthorized access and corruption throughout the data lifecycle. So data security itself is, at that point where we need to keep our data safe from attackers, while data privacy is that branch of data security that actually handles the data itself, right? Just like we mentioned, you need to prioritize the data and make it, pseudo for, unauthorized access, basically. So we have different techniques as well in data privacy. I'll be brushing through these techniques quickly. So these techniques are actually there to address the friction and risk around using sensitive data. So, and with these techniques, it actually enables data scientists to minimize the time they use in collating data and allow them to spend more time running and analyzing models. So different privacy protection techniques actually offers different protection levels in data science. So it's very essential to know and understand how they work as a data scientist, depending on the nature of the application and the data itself. So you can choose one technique or the other, or one over the other, basically. So one of the techniques that we have is anonymization, which is also called privacy protection sometimes. Yeah, it's a form of privacy protection. So how does anonymization works, right? It's a way to guarantee the privacy of personal and sensitive data just to anonymize it, basically. So anonymization actually refers to the process of irreversibly transforming your data to prevent the re-identification of individuals, right? So this is what it means. If a company releases an anonymized data set, for example, theoretically, it's actually very impossible to identify a person from that kind of data that they released. So anonymization actually represents highest form of privacy protection, right? So in data science, we'll have a couple of packages, or tools rather, that we use to anonymize data. One of which is called Faker, right? So Faker, it's Python library. It's capable of generating fake data like fake names, fake IDs, numbers, fake categories, and all of those, right? So I'll just be sharing quick code snippet on how to implement anonymization using Python, for example. So just like you can see on my screen, we have Faker, which is the Python package that handles anonymization, right? We tend to import from this particular package. And we also make use of pandas sometimes, just like most of the data scientists in the house know. Pandas are actually used for data exploration, right? So we initialize an instance of Faker, right? We are saying, oh, generate for me fake informations about people, right? And moving forward, we can then create a list of fake names, right? Just like we have a list comprehension saying, in a range of 10 people, generate 10 fake names, right? Then afterwards, what we are saying next is those 10 names that you generate, those fake 10 names that you generated, insert all of these fake names into a data frame. A data frame is sort of a data type where you can handle a lot of data. So it comes like in a 2-dimensional array or 1-dimensional array, basically. So that's basically what we are doing. So on the right hand of my screen, you can see what this particular code generated, right? Generated 2 sets of information, one for student, one for new student name. We can see different kind of names there, and all of these names are actually fake names, right? So usually, when you're anonymizing data, basically, you can generate these sort of names, right, from an original name. And you can also take them back to default if you want to. So this is just like a code snippet. For anybody interested in this code or what it looks like or how it works, you can always reach out to me on Slack and I'll get that to you. So moving forward quickly, we have data masking. So data masking, actually aims at protecting data by removing or altering its direct, sometimes indirect form, basically. So here are several techniques to actually mask a data, right? We have things like encryption. For some of us that are quite familiar with databases, SQL, we all know that we can encrypt our data into our database and decrypt it sometimes, right? So encryption basically means hiding sensitive data using a cipher-protected format, and which makes use of an encryption key. So it's just like you have a key to a room, you have things in that room, you only can access that room with that key, and you can close that room with that key. So you can open a room with a key, you can close a room with a key. Same thing as encryption. You can hide sensitive data using a key, and you can unhide that sensitive data using a key. We also have shuffling, right? Shuffling is like scrambling your data within a column to sort of disassociate it with its original attribute, sort of. We have suppression, where you have to remove from the data set some sensitive columns. So in your data set, maybe you have a column that has balances of people's accounts. So what you do in that situation, you tend to suppress it, right? You can remove those sensitive columns at that moment if they wouldn't have so much of an effect to whatever you're doing with your data at that point. We have reduction, right? Masking out part of the entirety of your columns value, basically. So masking or pseudonymization of data requires the use of some packages as well in Python. So, and these packages actually provide helper functions called GeoConcept pseudonymize. So that's the name of the package, right? GoCept.pseudonymize. To actually pseudonymize data like text, integers, email addresses, license tags, and all of those. I'll also be showing a code snippet of what that looks like. So this is what data masking implementation looks like, or pseudonymization. Don't know if I got that right? So for example, you have a name, right? And you want to mask this particular name, right? You can implement this using pseudonymization, right? And it actually marks out your name. You can max out the name of your street. You can max out an email address. You can max out a phone number. Just like you can also see on the right hand of my screen, these are the output of information that we maxed out, right? These are the original information by my left, and we have the one we've maxed by my right. So they're actually the same. We are just maxing them out just to privatize this particular data, or to sort of protect this data from, actually leaving traces of identification, basically. So if we have this particular name and we max it this way, it will be very difficult for attackers or scammers to actually, know what exact information it's on that particular data at that point in time. So this data maxing or pseudonymization. So last but not the least, we have synthetic data, right? Is an alternative approach actually to privacy protection. It actually works more like anonymization, right? So instead of altering or masking the original data, one generates completely new artificial data, right? So sometimes for most data scientists that work with machine learning models, they often tend to create new data set at some point, right? That could mimic the statistical properties of an original data. So you have an original data, right? But you just want to mimic that sort of data, probably for testing purposes and all of those in machine learning before you train your model. There are some packages as well that enables you to create completely artificial data, synthetic data, right? So we call this package SDV, or Synthetic Data Vault, right? It's a Python package that helps to generate synthetic data based on data you provide. So, this data could be in single tables, it could be in multiple tables, or even in time series, right? Actually generate synthetic data by applying a lot of mathematical techniques, machine learning models such as deep learning and all of those technical stuff. So here is a sample implementation of generating an entire synthetic data, or an entire artificial data. So we have, just like you can see on my screen, we have two packages we are making use of. One is Panda, one is SDV, right? And we're actually telling this particular package that, we have some sort of data, right? And this data, just like I can see on the right hand of my screen at the top, this data is our original data, right? But what we want you to do for us, right, is take this data, right, apply some mathematical techniques to it, and try and generate an entire new artificial data that is quite different from the original one. So that's basically what it's doing. So this particular package is actually getting a data, is fitting it into its model, which performs some mathematical operations, and is giving out a sample, right? So as you can see below here, we have the newly generated artificial data, which is quite different from the one at the top level. So that's what SDV package does. It actually helps us to create synthetic database. So yeah, that's basically different kind of techniques that are involved, in privacy protection, right? So we would also quickly just talk about an example real-world case of, data privacy breach, for example. So back in 2016, we had two guys, Emil Krigegard and Julius Delberg, right? They actually shared a data set on the Open Science Framework. We had a community at the time, Open Science Framework, right? And they shared a data set that actually included, information on over 70,000 members of an online dating service. OkCupid, I don't know if most of us are quite familiar with that. It's a very popular online dating service. So they shared this particular data of over 70,000 members. And the researchers actually scraped information from the OkCupid site, right? We had some researchers as well that scraped this information from these sites. They scraped information that were including usernames, right? They scraped information about ages, gender, religion, personal characteristics as well, right? So basically that was a data breach because some researchers were able to scrape out data from this particular sites, right? So they were actually summoned at a parliament, and they were asked, right, that, oh, okay, why did you guys, get this information, and how you guys were able to gather this information? It's against the law and all of those, right? And what their reasons was that this particular data were actually up in the public for use, right? And they made use of it because some guys from the OkCupid shared it on a framework, on an open science framework, and they made use of that data, basically, right? So that was their reason, and they were not penalized for that. Just to tell you that a data set was shared, and that data set actually included, actual data of people, right? But in situations where we would have probably privatized all of this data or sort of secure all of this data, they wouldn't be able to get this sort of actual information about people. In other words, putting people out, putting people in risk, basically, with that original data that these scientists actually got held off at the moment in time. So that's just to tell you how important it is for us to protect our data at all time when we're using them, basically. So yeah, data privacy for increased data protection is a very important topic for discussion in today's world, right? Organizations and companies using data and implementing data science must actually handle data with respect to its privacy. Using best practices outlined here will actually help organizations to create a baseline privacy framework for becoming a responsible and ethical steward of personal data. So that's all about data privacy, right? So we've actually talked about some of its fundamentals, what it is, why we need to protect our data at all times, some of the techniques that are involved, an example use case of data breach, and all. Data privacy, just like I explained at the beginning of this presentation, is quite complex. So we just have to break it down, for us to quickly grasp the basic concepts. And we could also, in the future, talk about more advanced ways of data security and data privacy, basically. So that's all about my presentation for today. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. So, before we end the KD this morning, do we have any question regarding data privacy? Anyone with question? Okay, so if we don't have any question, let me just ask this. So this data within how we can protect ourselves and all that. So I would say I have two questions. So the first one is data, when we're working with data, we are working with data to get let's say to look for trends, to help business, and to each of the figures actually have a significance in terms of say you are trying to work with data for a particular business, and you get to work with numbers, you get to work with amount of goods and service. Is it, in an encrypted form? Can those data be worked on at their how will I call it now? At their normality, are they preserved in the encryption states? In the sense that when you're working with, let's say, price of goods, and maybe you encrypt from, let's say the price is 50,000 naira, and you encrypt to say it now becomes maybe a form of decimal. Are they still relatable at that stage in relation to the business, or it has to be decrypted to be worked with? Do you think there wouldn't be a form of maybe data loss and all that during those stages? And the other question is that when you're working with large organization where you have to work with large form of data, and of course we talk about the big data and everything like that. So how expensive is this data privacy thing? Do you think small businesses can also leverage on securing their data and making sure their data does not get into the wrong hands and things like that? So those are the questions.
Okay, all right. So yeah, for your first question about when we implement data privacy on data, do we still preserve the normalization of that particular data? So just like I explained earlier on, most of the times when we tend to implement data privacy is at that junction where we need to share data to third-party services, for example. So, and at that point, it's then important for us to be able to protect our data, by all form. We can, apply pseudonymization, just like I said, we could encrypt them, right? So making use of that data within an organization doesn't necessarily have to be in a privacy mode. They would always be at their original mode, right? Because for an organization, for example, they need to derive insights, they need to sort out for patterns within a data, just to make better decisions for their organization, right? That is actually done by the actual data, but at the junction where you need to share your data to third-party services or third-party individuals and all of those, that's that junction where it's quite necessary for us to implement data privacy, right? And for your second question, basically, is how expensive it is. When it comes to that, it will be dependent on the resource, right? So most organizations, when they want to handle their data or when they want to handle big data, they tend to hire data engineers, for them to have the, the good hands for their data, basically. So for small businesses, yes, they could also employ data privacy or data security to their data. So I made mention of a misconception in the industry of data privacy and data security, right? So data privacy is just a subset of data security that needs to deal with the data. But data security overall actually is a complex process where you need to save your data in an organization from being attacked by scammers or attackers outside, right? So you have your data in an organization, but you're scared of somebody breaching into your organization and picking up those data, right? Just like I gave an example of, a particular marketing industry, right? They might have data breach. Somebody might pierce into their organization and get data. Competitors do that sometimes. They get data so that they can, outperform you in the markets and all of those. So at that point, what you're doing is data security. You're securing the data holistically, right, from attackers. But when we talk about data privacy, is at that point where you're actually dealing with the actual data. You want to share your data to third-party services, third-party individuals, organizations. You know, you implement data privacy there, right? Because you're handling the data, you can max it, right? Or just share out synthetic data that looks almost the same as the original one. But within an organization, you always make use of the original form of data to derive your insights, sort out for patterns and the likes.
All right. Well understood. Thank you very much. All right. So thank you everyone for joining up the session today. It's good to have everyone on the call. And I believe we have been able to learn one or two things about data security and data privacy. So Mr. Mohammed, thank you for the presentation today. It's quite insightful and educating. So this will be where we'll be drawing the curtain for today. We are going to continue from here next week, Tuesday. So see you guys by then.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right.